So we are hosting two webinars today for the Eastern and Western Hemisphere time zones, and another round on the 25th of November, as you can see. And we will invite our stakeholders to join these webinars to learn more in order to provide feedback through the public consultation, which is open until the 5th of December, and you will see the links in the subsequent slides, and then also to get in touch with us if you would like to participate in our activities, notably the trialing of the Battery Passport benchmarking framework. My name is Kaisa Toroskainen. I'm a senior manager in the Global Battery Alliance Secretariat, and I'm joined by Jenny van Niekerk, who is also working for the Secretariat. And today's webinar will be recorded for the purposes of sharing it with those who could not join us live today. We will record the presentation part without questions and answers for smooth watching, and then we'll open for questions and answers at the end. Hopefully that is okay for everyone. And with that, we can get started. So before going into the substance of today, I would like to remind everybody of the Global Battery Alliance's antitrust compliance guidelines. We are a global pre-competitive multi-stakeholder alliance, which means that we apply this guideline in all of our meetings, including external ones such as this one. And you can review the guidelines in the next slide. And I would please ask everyone to take a note of this and be in compliance with not discussing any market related information in our meetings, and also approach us in the Secretariat if you feel that we are infringing on any of these topics or these guidelines. With that, I'm happy for us to present the agenda of today. So for those of you who do not know the Global Battery Alliance, I will first give a brief introduction to who we are and to the concept of the Battery Passport. We will then move on to present our roadmap towards a product certification for sustainable batteries and the beta release package, which we have released toward that milestone. We'll then dive a little bit deeper into the battery benchmarks, which is the publication containing the reporting modules, etc. The idea is not to present absolutely everything. At the same time, we will go into a little bit of detail in today's webinar, which will hopefully allow you to navigate the documents and the materials on your own, and also provide feedback through the consultation. We'll then briefly share what are the next steps and what are your opportunities to engage, and then indeed look forward to questions and discussion. Let's start then with our introduction. So the Global Battery Alliance is the world's largest and the only pre-competitive multi-stakeholder partnership founded in 2017, which brings together over 150 partner organizations across the battery value chain, from mining to recycling, but also its corporate and non-corporate stakeholders from civil society, international organizations, and academia. These organizations work together towards a vision of scaling a sustainable, responsible, and circular battery value chain towards 2030, with the obvious idea that none of these stakeholder groups could do it alone, and collective action is required. This way, the Global Battery Alliance is uniquely positioned to build common understanding of diverse stakeholders across the value chain, across geographies, and across stakeholder groups on what a sustainable battery should look like. And naturally from there, it flows that our flagship program, the Battery Passport, is an effort to set globally harmonized and agreed upon benchmarks for transparency and accountability in the battery supply chain. And that brings us to what the Battery Passport is a little bit more closely on the next slide. Before then, you can see here some of our indeed stakeholder, partner, and member constituencies. So as you can see, we bring together organizations from the public sector, civil society, and industry, which are also represented in our governance equally, including the board of directors. And you can review the full list on our website. So moving on to our solution, the Battery Passport, which is an emerging sustainability certification scheme for batteries implemented on the back of the digital product passport. So the idea is really to ultimately in 2027 produce a battery sustainability certification, which is similar to the Forest Stewardship Council or other certifications we are used to seeing on other products, with the idea that such a certification does not yet exist for batteries, but can actually help convey and collect data on responsible sourcing, due diligence, risk management, carbon footprint, circularity, traceability, etc., in a harmonized manner across the value chain. Some of you will know that in some jurisdictions, notably in the European Union, digital product passport for batteries will become mandatory as of 2027. So it is no coincidence that we are releasing our certification at the same time. However, we are not tasked to implement purely the EU battery passport. Rather, we are developing a way of presenting and collecting this information in a harmonized and comparable manner at the product level, which can then be adjoined to the battery passport, mandatory in the EU for those to whom it is relevant, but it is also meant to be interoperable with requirements on traceability, provenance, etc. in other jurisdictions. Moving on, brief overview of some of our milestones on the road towards the battery passport certification. In 2022, our members developed some foundational rule books for defining what sustainability looks like on child labor, human rights, and greenhouse gas. And we are still quite known for our greenhouse gas rulebook, notably, which is referenced in multiple other methodologies as well. We, on the back of those three initial rulebooks, then launched the world's first battery passport proof of concept in 2023. And last year, we brought together 80% of the global EV battery market to trial an extended number of rule books and data collection, as well as data verification, etc. Building upon these milestones towards a sustainability certification, on the next section, I will give you an overview of what are the next steps that we envision. So now we are in 2027, and we have indeed released a beta release package containing the battery benchmarks, an updated version of the greenhouse gas rulebooks, etc., which build and provide the foundation for the certification scheme. We have opened this set of documents for public consultation and are right now in the stage of preparing for operational trials, which allow supply chain members to trial different industry challenges, which you can see listed here as examples through this battery passport program. These operational trials will continue until 2026 next year, when we will also develop more of the details of the certification scheme, as well as undergo a second public consultation, as is good practice, and then working towards launch of the certification in 2027. I will come back to the operational trials a little bit later. So for now, we can move on, and I would just like to show you a little bit more visually what such a certification can look like, how the idea of bringing more transparency harmonized exchange of data and harmonized collection of environmental, social, and governance compliance can support these efforts instead of having a battery value chain where we have little visibility to who is in the value chain, under what conditions materials are produced, and what kind of production processes take place later on. And here you can really, in the middle, see how the translation of these facility level performances can be then translated to the product level towards the certification, which can help communicate this information to the downstream users and buyers of batteries, as well as their different stakeholders, such as investors, regulators, and affected communities, amongst others. You can see also a number of logos of existing standards, which I will elaborate on shortly, with the idea that verification and assurance and trust in this data is crucial for such a scheme to work. And as you can imagine, in order for this to work in practice, a number of rules are required in terms of collecting the data, the assurance, the scoring, the aggregation, as well as the third-party verification. And this is really what the beta release of the battery passport and the battery benchmarks will provide. And that's what we will be presenting next. These are all also, you can go to the next slide, elements that we are consulting on. So as we go through the material, take note already of any feedback and thoughts, as we will love to gather your views through the public consultation on all of these topics. So indeed, the GBA battery benchmarks were published about a month ago, and they present the first ever global set of benchmarks for sustainable batteries. They cover 18 ESG issues, which are aligned with international regulations, and do that by distilling the similarities and benchmarking the differences of existing standards. They also come with data assurance guidelines and scoring principles, as well as an updated version of the greenhouse gas rulebook. Moving on, you will see the contents of the document here, which I, of course, will not go through in detail, but you will see the essential sections which present the vision that I've just shared, more about the theory of change and the design principles of the battery benchmarks, the data assurance rulebook, as well as the scoring principles, and then each of those 18 modules in detail, as well as the underlying standard mapping. And as I mentioned, these are all elements on which we would like to get your feedback, whether they meet your expectations, are the benchmarkings correct, are they accurate, etc. We can start the presentation. I will go through each of those sections at a high level, and then I look forward to any questions. So first of all, here you can see the 18 environmental, social, and governance benchmarking modules. The ones in bold are included in this beta release version, and they are aligned with the EU Batteries Regulation Annex 10 risks, and allow then companies that must meet those compliance requirements in 2027 to use this as a strong tool for preparing and ultimately implementing their due diligence in line with the EU batteries regulation. Each of these modules has been built on the back of existing voluntary sustainability standards. You can see a number here, but we have also worked with other standard setters to provide more general feedback and guidance on the development of this framework, and are also looking to add other standards, notably those that apply to the downstream of the value chain in the future. You will also see a few remarks at the bottom of this framework, notably on indigenous people's rights. The nature of multi-stakeholder consensus building is such that some very challenging and very important issues that impact sustainability of the battery value chain are not easy to agree upon. And together with our members, we have agreed that building consensus on what sustainability benchmarks should look like on this particular issue of Indigenous people's rights requires some more time, and we have not therefore included it in this framework of 2025, but we continue working on it, and we invite also feedback through the consultation from external stakeholders on what are the considerations that we should include. You also see a few modules that are not bolded, which means that they are in our work plan to be added in the future. And we would also like to get your feedback through the consultation on any priorities amongst these different modules and any other topics that this framework should ultimately cover. Let's look at what an individual reporting module looks like in a little bit more detail. So here you can see the pollution reporting module. First of all, each of these modules has been organized according to the 6-step framework of the OECD's Responsible Business Guidance. Responsible Business Conduct Guideline, apologies, to allow a risk-based approach. So it really facilitates the fact that facilities in the battery supply chain should report fully on those risks which are material and relevant to their operations to avoid unnecessary reporting burden, which is already a reality for many facilities. These steps in each of the modules are built, as I mentioned, by distilling the common elements of existing standards and then also recognizing where certain standards may go further than others, which you can see here in the table with the X's and also the different levels. This allows for a few things. It allows for facilities that have already assured their management systems and their ESG performance and their risk management against one of these standards to be automatically recognized. And they do not have to do additional reporting, indeed, in order to avoid that unnecessary reporting burden. It also allows downstream actors to not use or require a single standard, but understand what are the differences between different standards, but allow for the fact that in their supply chains, they will likely have suppliers, facilities that implement multiplicity of these different standards, as you saw in that picture earlier on. Each of these steps is also organized in 3 levels, as you can see. And just to share a little bit more about those levels, on the next slide, you see how the level A benchmarks are practices that reflect notably the risk categories and the international frameworks that are outlined in the EU Batteries Regulation, as well as the underlying OECD and other guidelines, to try to translate these regulatory requirements into practical expectations for sustainability that meet internationally agreed frameworks. Level AA then built upon level A and reflects practices that are required by some standards, but perhaps not all, and which go beyond level A. And then the AAA level typically reflects additional emerging or aspirational expectations, either included in individual sustainability standards, or they may also be innovative expectations that the GBA's multi-stakeholder working groups have come together to agree that the battery value chain collectively should move towards going forward. If we then move on, I will briefly present Yes, one more element on standard benchmarking. So many of you will be familiar with the fact that standards can be benchmarked and assessed on their thematic coverage, but also on how are the standards themselves governed, meaning what kind of multi-stakeholder engagement they include, what kind of assurance and audit processes they require, what level of transparency is provided to the audit results, etc. And we have layered this standard recognition framework and benchmarking on top of the thematic benchmarking as well to recognize those standards that also go even further in regards to these criteria, and also to set a minimum bar for those standards that can be automatically recognized in our framework. You can see this also in the document in the annex, and equally we look forward to your feedback on these criteria, given that there are a number of standard benchmarking exercises that have been conducted in the past few years, and we have tried our best to use those as guidelines in order to not reinvent the wheel here either. With that, we presented the essence of the benchmarking framework in terms of the substance. I will now just give you a brief overview of the data assurance and the scoring elements, and then we are moving towards the end of the presentation. So, as has already become quite evident, assuring and verification by independent third parties of the data that is submitted to the battery passports is absolutely crucial for stakeholders and users to be able to trust it. And how this is intended to work within the battery passport has actually two levels of verification. So if I start actually from the figure number 2 here, you will see an 3-level assurance escalator, as we call it, which recognizes site level verification against existing standards at level 3. So if a facility can produce an audit report or a certification against one of the recognized standards, they will be verified for effectiveness of their management systems, etc., and can be automatically recognized. We also are very cognizant that there are many facilities that are either new, are just starting operations, or are operating in jurisdictions where certification is not yet as common or otherwise emerging. And not everyone has certifications against the existing standards. And therefore, it's very important to allow these sites to also self-report and progressively provide verification documents to go together with their evidence documents. These can be first or second party assessments, such as audit reports by clients or other types of verification that come together with their policies, etc. Or they can start really with a self-assessment only at level 1 and provide internal policy documents, procedures, management systems, etc., to demonstrate that their internal practices are in line with the expectations, but don't yet have that third-party verification. Number 1 on this slide, on the left-hand side, you see some core principles of the other level of verification that the GBA itself is planning to issue on all of the data that is being gathered. So the Global Battery Alliance will approve and train and provide guidelines for independent third-party verification on a desk basis to sample all of the data that is being provided, to check the veracity of the data contained in these reports, ensure that the data exchange rules are being followed in line with the implementation profiles, which is a bit of a technical term for exchange of the data digitally, and also that these sites adhere, or these passports adhere to the rules for data aggregation and scoring. This brings me to the point of scoring on the next slide. So in order to translate all of that information that is gathered throughout the supply chain into comparable and harmonized metrics, we have developed some relatively high-level scoring principles for now, which are included in the document, and are developing the detailed scoring methodology, also applying the lessons from the previous pilots. And we look forward to your comments on these as well. But some of these principles include a flat allocation of points. So each level from A to AAA will attract 1 point. These levels must be met sequentially, meaning that a site or facility cannot be recognized for their performance at the AAA level if they have not met the subsequent levels. Generally speaking, incomplete or missing or unreported data will be treated as zero and will be penalized for. However, a materiality assessment mechanisms for which risks are relevant and must be reported on is being developed. And when a facility can demonstrate that a particular risk is not material to their operations, they will not be penalized for these zero scores. And finally, the assurance escalator that I've just presented will allow rewarding through the scoring system any data that has been accompanied with either level 2 or level 3 third-party verification at the facility level. The other element around scoring relates to the ultimate display and presentation of these scores, at what level of detail, etc. So the ultimate goal is to present a battery score or quality seal at the product level aggregated across the facilities. However, to provide a more nuanced picture of the sustainability performance of each battery, we will also share some details on at a disaggregated basis and present indicators, for example, per ESG topic, per stage of the value chain, etc. And we are also still developing the exact format of presenting absolute versus relative values. Finally, the carbon footprint of the battery will also be presented separately as an independent indicator because it is for now the only quantitative indicators. The other ones are really about the qualitative management systems. And you can also have a look at the 2024 GBA pilots if you're interested in seeing how the presentation of the battery passports and the scoring took place last time, and if this inspires more feedback from you. That is essentially the contents of the battery benchmarks and the beta release set of the certification framework. It's a lot of information, and I invite everybody to, of course, take a look at the document that has been published and really familiarize themselves. But hopefully this presentation has helped you guide yourselves and navigate yourselves a little bit. Briefly about next steps. Apologies, there was one more slide. Indeed, just to provide a brief update on the greenhouse gas rulebook, which we have moderately updated from last year's version based on some of the lessons from the pilots to provide more coherence, etc., and clarity to the methodology based on that experience. However, we expect a fuller revision to version 3.0 once the European Union's EU Batteries Regulation Delegated Act on the calculation methodology of the battery carbon footprint has been released to fully align our rulebook with that methodology. So, but we are also at the moment consulting at a high level on this rulebook and its applicability. So please also have a look at it and provide feedback on it. And it will also, of course, be included in our operational trials. And with that, we can go to the next steps. So Two levels of next steps already mentioned several times. We have opened public consultation on the 7th of October, lasting until the 5th of December. You can access it through this link, and you should have also received it via whichever media you have received the invitation to these webinars. And we truly invite you to provide feedback and also share widely with your different networks so that we can gather as diverse a set of perspectives also from the affected stakeholders and non-corporate actors, which will not be implementing the battery passports as such, but which are instrumental for designing a strong and trustable framework and also using that data ultimately. The second next step is the operational trials, and this is, of course, somewhat more for the industry as well as the users and investors of battery products. So, as we know, there are some common industry challenges with regards to lack of visibility, lack of traceability, lack of comparability of performance, duplicated efforts on due diligence by different clients, question marks, quite a lot of scratching of heads around implementation of the EU Batteries Regulation from 2027, and also how are digital product passports going to actually facilitate all of this work without making it even more complicated. So these are some of the challenges that we invite our stakeholders and partners from industry side to join us on trial as part of this operational trials. We are already in full steam with Global Battery Alliance members to form supply chain consortia of supply chains spanning from mining or recycled materials to battery production and further. And we definitely invite also those of you who are not yet Global Battery Alliance members to contact us if you're interested in trialing, if you are grappling with any of these challenges in your operations, how to demonstrate your own performance to your clients, or how to ask for this information from your downstream. Do get in touch, and we would love to work together with you as well.